This year, I had my yearly checkup in August, but with a new doctor since my old one retired. The new doctor, Marion Wellner, is a young woman with red hair in her early 30s. I felt uneasy about her conducting the exam, partly due to the carnal physical contact and concerns about feeling embarrassed. Dr. Wellner's nurse handled initial procedures like checking blood pressure, conducting an ECG, and testing my ability to remember. Typically, my mind would wander during the initial stages of the exam, but this time I fretted about being nearly unclothed in front of a young, attractive woman. However, my nervousness ruled out any chance of arousal, so there was no need to worry. Once we finished that part, she smiled and remarked, "Well, I'm sure you're glad it's all over." "Yes, glad. Thank you," I responded with a smile. The remainder of the examination proceeded routinely, with excellent blood work results and everything checking out fine. As we were about to leave, she inquired, "Do you have 3 children?" I confirmed, "Yes, 2 boys and a girl." She then asked if any were adopted, to which I replied in the negative, puzzled by her question. She blushed slightly and explained, "Well, I'm new, and I reviewed all your notes before our meeting." "Well, it doesn't matter. Thank you for being so quick," I said, waving off her embarrassment. "You must explain yourself, doctor. This is my body," I insisted. To my surprise, Dr. Wellner disclosed, "Mr. Miller, you have a disease. You have been infertile since birth." Shocked and confused by this revelation, I requested copies of all my medical records immediately. About 30 minutes later, I received the notes, which left me deeply contemplative. At 48, married to Melissa for 26 years, we have 3 children, Brad, 24 years old, Mary, 22 years old, and William, 20 years old. Or so I thought. Brad is married with a son on the way, Mary just graduated from college, and William is a junior. This news raised questions about their paternity, though upon reflection, I wasn't entirely convinced by Dr. Wellner's diagnosis. To verify her claims, I reached out to a college friend who's a doctor in New York, ensuring strict confidentiality through email exchanges. "Done, and please send the invoice," I requested. "The service is done quickly," I noted. He called back at 3:30. "Ted, at birth, you had a disease that led to infertility. I'm guessing you didn't do anything about it," Dr. Wellner stated. "I didn't know about this," I admitted. "Well then, when you were born and you were diagnosed, nothing could be done. Over the past 10 years, we have developed a method of helping." "Can you send me a textbook on this subject, Mark?" I inquired. "Certainly. I'll send you an email in 10 minutes, Mark assured. "Good luck," he added. "Thank you," I responded. "Hey, Ted, don't you have kids?" Mark queried. "Eat well," he advised. "That's what I thought," he concluded. Oh, I see. Good luck," he said. I hung up and contacted the DNA lab to inform them that they had agreed to send several sets on the same day. They arrived at 5 o'clock, and I placed them in my briefcase before heading home. My youngest, William, was still attending school and was scheduled to leave the following week. After considering the situation, I concluded that testing one of the children would be sufficient. Upon my arrival home, I found Will in the living room reading while Melissa was in the kitchen cooking. She typically returns early from work, selling real estate through an agency owned by my older brother, Robert. The aroma of fish filled the air, indicating her cooking. We had crusty cod and salad for dinner. The food was good. I sensed that Mel noticed my hesitation, but Will probably did not. Mel is 48 years old, maintains the same weight since college at 59 kilograms, and stands at 1 meter and 70 centimeters. She has dark brown hair and eyes similar to mine and is quite attractive. While Mel and I were tidying up after dinner, I took the glass Will had used and later cleaned its rim with a swab. Subsequently, I gathered some hairs from Will's brush, swabbed the neckline of a t-shirt from his dirty clothes basket, and also took samples from his sneakers. Additionally, I swabbed the inside of my cheek, sealed everything in envelopes, and placed them in a briefcase. That evening, Will departed. Mel noticed my subdued demeanor and asked, "What's happening to you, Ted? You seem lethargic. Did something happen during the medical examination?" I responded, "No, I'm as healthy as always. He was probably just nervous about the new doctor." Mel inquired further about the doctor, and I described her as good-looking and mentioned my nervousness. Mel asked if I had not gotten up from my state of nervousness. I admitted, "No, I was too anxious about this." Mel reassured me, "Well, I'll see her next week, and I'll ask to check on her." I left that evening, declining Mel's advances, explaining that I wasn't in the mood. She received it gracefully. My refusal was out of the ordinary. The following day, I personally delivered the DNA samples to the laboratory. I opted for expedited analysis, with assurances of results by Friday. 2 days later, I resumed work. As a lawyer at an investment bank in Washington, I oversee a team of 6 other lawyers, situated close to regulatory authorities. Having held this position for 22 years, I am well compensated and hold valuable stock options. Despite my distraction at work, I managed to fulfill my responsibilities. Cycling to and from work was a means of calming my nerves. Upon returning home at 6, Mel was absent, leaving a note about sandwiches and salad in the refrigerator. She mentioned attending a play and potentially a bachelorette party, activities she regularly engaged in. While her outings were routine, trust had dwindled. Utilizing the location tracker on her phone, I discovered she was not at a nightclub, but rather at a motel near the Fairfax line. Over dinner, I conversed with Will about college. Although he anticipated it eagerly, the breakup with his girlfriend, Lisa, left him somewhat despondent. I retired early and Mel arrived at 11, retiring to bed soon after without a shower. When I attempted closeness, she withdrew slightly, indicating her lack of interest. I sought her reaction to confirm my suspicion of infidelity, though the identity of her paramour remained unknown. He showed no inclination toward closeness with her. The subsequent morning, I rose early and cycled to work again. After showering upon arrival, I delved into a busy morning. At 1 o'clock, the DNA laboratory phoned to inform me of the results, subsequently emailing the report. Shockingly, Will's samples matched those of my nephew, nearly causing me to faint. I have only one brother, Robert, 3 years my senior, who supported me throughout childhood. Similar in stature at 180 meters tall with an average build, he excelled in athletics during school and played basketball at university. While not a standout player, he pursued a career in real estate after graduating and eventually founded his own firm. He married his college sweetheart, Glenda Wilson, and they raised 3 children, all now college graduates. Melissa joined his firm around 4 years ago, having previously worked as a teacher. Despite my substantial income, she desired a more stimulating career, or so she claimed. I harbored no belief in her words. Upon learning about the DNA revelation, I sat contemplating the situation. All 3 of my children celebrated birthdays toward the end of September. The planning for them started around Christmas when Mel and I made the decision to start a family. She discontinued her birth control pills, and we attempted to conceive for several months before Brad's arrival at Christmas. It coincided with our usual large family gathering, where Rob and his family were present. Recalling the years following that Christmas, Mel and her friend Linda Green embarked on a week-long meditation retreat, starting on Boxing Day and concluding on New Year's Day. Occasionally, they extended their stay by an extra week. These retreats typically occurred at centers in the West Virginia mountains. When Brad was born, Mel skipped the retreat the following year, but I attended when Mary arrived the next September. They skipped the workshop while Mary was breastfeeding, but resumed when she was 15 months old. Will's birth in the subsequent September marked the continuation of these annual retreats. Reflecting on this, I realized the retreats ceased when Mel began working for Rob. Linda, Mel's longtime friend, joined Rob's company when he established it, resulting in the 3 of them working together for a period. The following weekend, we accompanied Will back to college. I rented a minibus and we enjoyed a pleasant 2-hour drive on Saturday, followed by lunch with Will and assistance with his apartment move-in with his friend Mike Watson. After bidding them farewell, Mel and I were alone, and I must admit, I was rather withdrawn. Mel eventually noticed and expressed concern, prompting me to deflect her inquiries, citing numerous worries. The remainder of the trip, about an hour, was spent in silence. After dropping Mel off, I retreated to a local bar and indulged in beer, further pondering the situation. I struggled to comprehend how Mel could have undergone any medical procedures to conceive Rob's child, leading me to conclude that their relationship involved repeated closeness over many years. The thought that Mel may have met Rob at the motel bar left me angrier than ever. They say anger clouds the mind, and indeed, everything seemed tinted with an eerie hue. I startled the young female bar manager, who hastily accepted my payment and bid me farewell. Seeking solace, I sought out my circle of friends, including my closest confidant, Ned Bart. His wife Sadie and Mel had never been close, and when I arrived at their house, they immediately recognized my distress. Ned had a makeshift gym in his garage where we often practiced self-defense. I expressed my need for release to Ned, knowing he had a punching bag we could use. Certainly. He and I stepped out into the backyard. Donning gloves, I attacked his heavy bag with a ferocity as if my very existence depended on its rupture. Ned observed quietly. After the initial burst of energy, I adopted a more methodical approach, I continued striking the bag until I collapsed. Ned assisted me to his house, where I slumped into a lounge chair on the terrace. Sadie offered me water, and as I regained my composure, tears began to flow. Ned inquired if there was injury or pass away, to which I replied, "Not yet." My frustration morphed into a growl, prompting these two wise souls to give me space. 10 minutes later, Ned brought beer, and Sadie joined me, urging me to confide in them. I made them promise not to divulge anything, and proceeded to spill my heart out. Both were stunned. Ned questioned, "How? I mean, without your knowledge? Your parents should have been aware." Reflecting, I recalled that my childhood medical records detailed the condition known to them. Sadie inquired about my plans. I confessed uncertainty, and she cautioned against rash actions, reminding me of the perils of prison. Agreeing, I felt it best to head home to ease Mel's worry and postpone confrontation. Upon arrival, Mel awaited me at the door, concerned about my whereabouts. I concocted a tale involving a beer stop and meeting Ned for work, expressing regret for not calling. After a shower, we shared dinner. The following Sunday, we enjoyed a picnic and rollerblading at a local park, though closeness was absent, leaving Mel puzzled and disappointed. The next morning, I attended to legal and financial matters, consulting a lawyer and visiting the bank and HR department to adjust my accounts. Learning about divorce laws in our state, I requested Millie Stanton to file a petition on alternative grounds, withholding it from Mel until instructed otherwise. That evening, I installed tracking software on Mel's phone and discreetly placed voice recorders in our house and her car. I asked Mel to arrange a party with Rob and Glenda on Friday. Throughout the week, I stayed late at work, citing important tasks to Mel. On Wednesday, I returned home promptly, maintaining a cheerful facade during dinner despite the absence of closeness, leaving Mel visibly disappointed. Later, I retrieved all the files from the recorders and inspected her phone. Once Mel retired for the night, I tuned in. There was minimal activity throughout the day, with no one else around and Mel refraining from self-talk. She only dialed Rob's cell phone once, and my mom's number once. My mother had been widowed 5 years prior, age 78, residing just a half hour away from my childhood home. The doorbell chimed. Initially, I heard Mel's voice. "Mom, have you heard anything about Tim lately?" "Well, he seems off. He had a checkup and hasn't been himself since," my mother responded. "Can't say for sure. Just checking in," Mel replied. "Okay." The subsequent call was to Rob. "Rob, it's Mel. No, we can't do it this week. You guys will arrive on Friday, and Tim's acting strange." "Can't say. I don't see any way he'd find out anything. Look, we're being cautious, and regardless, I think he got bad news from the checkup." "Okay, see you soon, baby." This exchange marked the pivotal moment of my marriage's demise. They remained together. It occurred to me that initially they might have believed they were doing me a favor, but in actuality, regardless of their intentions, I intend to retaliate as best I can. Rob and Glenda showed up at 6:30 on Friday. Mel and I prepared food. We grilled burgers and fries, along with a salad. Throughout, I deliberately avoided acknowledging Mel, though she noticed, she didn't comment. When the doorbell rang, she glanced at me and uttered, "I hope you're not in a foul mood, Tim." I remained silent, opening the door. Rob and Glenda greeted me, Glenda embracing me while Rob attempted the same, but I turned away. I served them drinks, beer for Rob and white wine for Glenda, and we settled on the terrace, all four of us. "I'm divorcing you, Mel," I stated. "Come Monday, you'll receive the divorce papers." "Rob, I'm pursuing child support for the years I've raised and financially supported your children." Mel broke into tears, and Rob leaped up, looming over me. "You're a fool. Idiot. I'll take you down now," he spat. Glenda observed as Rob tried to strike me while I sat on a porch chair. Dodging his blows, I retaliated, landing a punch in his abdomen. Despite his struggles, I struck him again, knocking the wind out of him. Unfazed, I delivered another blow to his stomach. Amidst the chaos, I didn't hear Mel's cries. I continued to pummel Rob until he collapsed onto my shoulder. Then I delivered a knee to his groin and tossed him onto the terrace before turning away. Glenda rose to her feet, directing her gaze solely at Mel, who hurried to Rob's side. He remained conscious, emitting groans. Mel glanced up at me, accusing, "You had no cause to damage Rob. None. You're barbaric. You could have eliminated him." Tears still streaming, she added, "And I still might. And you're not off the hook either. You're a conniving woman," I warned Mel, causing her to pale at the threat. Slowly, she retreated from Rob. Growling, I instructed her, "Pick up this worthless trash and get him out of my sight. You've got a minute before I finish the job." Mel struggled to lift Rob, burdened by his limp body. Turning to Glenda, she pleaded, "Help me with him, Glenda." Glenda snapped out of her daze, responding flatly, "No, you two deal with this yourselves. I'll admit, you're a piece of work." Mel managed to haul Rob onto the patio couch, then staggered away into the kitchen with him. I turned to Glenda. "So, you were unaware?" "No. No, I've had my suspicions about Rob over the years, but not with Mel. I think they're still together. Maybe she's fooling around with other guys. I don't know." The garage door rumbled open. Peering out the front door, I watched as Mel loaded Rob into her SUV's passenger seat and drove off. Glenda entered the house. She appeared pleasant enough, a 46-year-old blonde woman, well-dressed for the occasion, albeit with smudged makeup from crying. "More wine?" I offered. "No. Can you shed some light on all of this for me?" she implored. "I did it," I admitted, taking a seat opposite her at the kitchen table. Glenda began, "Whenever there were post-Christmas workshops, Rob always went on winter ski trips. I despise skiing and stayed home with Mark," referring to her son. "I wonder where they really went," I mused aloud. "Who cares? This is too much for me," Glenda sighed. "Sorry, Glenda, I assumed you knew. Are you definitely getting a divorce?" I inquired. "Absolutely. Never had any doubt." I offered Glenda the guest room for the night, which she accepted. Then we delved into discussions about the past, speculating on where and when Rob and Mel might rendezvous. Finally, I played for her the recording of Mel's conversation with Rob, leaving no doubt that their affair persisted. At 10 o'clock, we dined on hamburgers, discussing practical matters like future living arrangements. I had an apartment lined up near my workplace, assuming Mel and I would split the proceeds, including those from the house. For now, I'll stick around here, I decided. Glenda decided to head upstairs for bed. I followed to check on the guest room, finding it prepared. I fetched her a towel and toothbrush. Upon her departure, she remarked, "Tim, I've always favored you. I never cared for Mel. She deemed me inferior. Now I understand why." I bid her farewell with a wave before closing the door. The following morning, I was already up and about. Surprisingly, the police didn't show up at my door. I suppose neither Rob nor Mel desired any unwanted attention. I inquired of Glenda's plans. She disclosed her intention to stay with her mother until Rob left their home. I provided her with my lawyer's email, advising her to seek legal counsel for clarification. Observing her car still parked, I offered to accompany her for retrieving more belongings. She accepted. Retrieving a pistol from my weapons safe, I trailed her to their house, noting Mel's absence. Upon entry, we found the place deserted. Reflecting on the damage inflicted on that despicable man, I harbored dark thoughts of his potential suffering. Glenda took a seat, pondering aloud. "I wonder where they've gone." "Let me check," I offered, initiating the phone locator once more. I marveled at Mel's oversight in not noticing earlier. This time her phone pinpointed to Cambria Hospital. Confirming Rob's presence there, I relayed the information to Glenda. She resolved to return home and change the locks. Procuring new hardware from Home Depot, I spent the morning installing locks for both of us. After providing Glenda with the keys, I expressed my sympathy and suggested my return. She agreed, offering to prepare a meal. Concluding the task of changing my house's locks, I made spare keys for both of us before heading back to her at 4 a.m. Upon my return, I received a call on my mobile from Detective William James. He informed me of his presence at 204 Western Street, where Mrs. Glenda Miller was also located. "Is she the second witness? The sufferer's wife?" I inquired. "He wasn't a sufferer, Detective. And yes, that's her. Will you come?" "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Detective James, an African-American with a fair complexion, of short and broad stature, arrived in a smart suit and expensive moccasins. Glenda welcomed him through the front door, where he introduced himself and then asked, "Are you both comfortable?" "No," Glenda retorted. "It's our spouses who betray us, not us." Then she directed her gaze at me. "For now," she remarked calmly, as if it were inevitable. James eyed her, then me. "Maybe you'll get lucky, kid," he remarked. "Perhaps," I replied. I glanced at Glenda. She held my gaze unwaveringly. I couldn't help but feel that this wasn't the ideal approach for a police interrogation. James stated, "I'd like to speak with Mrs. Miller first." Glenda escorted him to the back patio, where I observed him activating the recorder on his phone. They conversed for nearly 20 minutes. Afterwards, Glenda motioned for me to join them outside. Passing by, she whispered, "I mean this." Her cryptic remark left me puzzled. I had always admired her, but I wasn't one for games. Nevertheless, her words lingered. The detective confirmed he was recording and prompted me to recount what occurred. I began by revealing the recent discovery that my children were actually Rob's. I detailed Friday's dinner and his reaction, as well as our altercation striving for accuracy. When I finished, he inquired how I came to know this. Reluctant to elaborate, I stated it wasn't from any informant, but rather chance. All right. Well, Mr. Miller, your account aligns with the wives. I haven't interviewed your brother yet. Why? Because based on my conversation with your wife, it seems he was the instigator and you responded. He's not in good shape presently. He'll need to remain for testing, James explained. Testing? I questioned, meeting his gaze. He emphasized the seriousness, but then smirked. What happens next? I queried. I'll document this and send it to the district attorney. She'll decide. I'll speak with your brother, James concluded, rising from his seat. As I escorted him inside, Glenda joined us, accompanying us to the front door. Exiting, James turned to us. Hope you two have a pleasant evening, he remarked before heading to his car. Glenda shut the door behind him. She positioned herself directly in front of me, tilting her head upward and to the side. Dinner, she declared. There's a substantial salad in the fridge. No need to hurry. Her tone left no room for misinterpretation regarding her desires. I marveled at women's ability to convey such intentions. I kissed her, accepting her invitation without hesitation. Our passion carried us to the sofa as she pulled me close. Responding to her fervor, I undressed her, sensing her anger. Standing over her, I watched as she shed her dress. Later, I wondered if she had orchestrated the encounter, dressing for seduction. It undeniably worked. Our encounter was fueled by lust, not love. I brought her to climax multiple times before reaching my own. Afterward, she slowly rose, taking my hand and leading me to the kitchen for dinner before we retired upstairs. I understand that what we're doing might be a form of reconciliation, but I don't mind, she confessed. Me neither, I agreed. We made love again, followed by a shower and more closeness. Experimenting with different positions, we reached climax multiple times until exhaustion overtook us. I woke up first and was in the master bedroom shower when she joined, sparking another argument. We resolved our conflict by soaking each other, washing away our tensions before bringing each other to climax once more. After another shower, we shared breakfast on Sunday, pondering our spouse's whereabouts, despite neither of us being religious. Checking Mel's phone location, I discovered she was at my mother's house, prompting thoughts of confronting my mother about her role in my betrayal. Discussing this with Glenda, she expressed uncertainty about the situation's origins. Nonetheless, I felt compelled to address it. Deciding to visit my mother, I invited Glenda to accompany me, acknowledging my inclination for retaliation. "Count me in," she quipped with a laugh. "Let's make sure the cheaters know what they've caused," she suggested, and we both chuckled at the idea of revenge lovemaking without the culprit's awareness. We reached my mother's house, where Mel's car was parked. Glenda and I stepped onto the porch, and Mom greeted us at the door. "Leave, Tim. You hurt Rob," she demanded. "Rob needed to be put in his place. He tried to slap me. I'm here to uncover your involvement in this. If I walk away now, I won't come back. Ever," I warned. Reluctantly, she allowed me inside, with Glenda following closely. Mel sat in the kitchen, locking eyes with me. In that moment, Glenda and I grasped the situation. "Oh, you're a real piece of work, aren't you?" Mel snapped. "Didn't wait, did you?" "No, why should I?" I retorted. "Your lover won't satisfy me anymore, but your husband surely can," Mel spat. I intervened before things escalated further, dragging her away as my mother shouted for us to stop. Turning to me, she accused, "Tim, you've probably ruined everything by being with Glenda." "No," I asserted. "Now I'm free, and so is she. Maybe it's always been that way for Mel and Rob. Glenda and I have some catching up to do, and we're off to a good start." Mel pleaded, "You need to listen to me and your mother. We can bring everything to light and perhaps mend things." I glanced between my wife and mother, willing to hear them out. My mother turned to Mel, who confessed, "We wanted children, you and I, but when we tried, your mother claimed you were sterile." "No, you didn't know," my mother interjected. "But I had a solution." "Rob," I supplied. "He could have fathered Mel's children, and you never would have suspected." "And you decided all this without informing me?" my mother countered. "Your father wanted to discuss it with all of us, but his proposal was rejected. The vote was 3-1. Yes, 2 traitors and you against your father. We explored various options, medical ones all too costly and complex," Mel explained. "And you should have realized you were raising Rob's children," she directed at me. "So we reluctantly agreed to the plan," my mother admitted. "Of course," I acknowledged. "And you deceived, snuck out, and engaged in relations for a week," my mother accused. "Once for 2 weeks," Mel corrected. And you enjoyed it, didn't you, Mel? I asked. After some initial hesitation, I did enjoy it. I won't deny that, Mel confessed. And it worked, I affirmed, all 3 times. And you look forward to your encounters with Rob? Mel inquired. Yes, I anticipated them, I admitted. He's a good man, Glenda interjected. Is this true? And what about me, you cow? My mother interjected. He deceived and mocked me, she said to Glenda. We assumed you might object. You were right. I objected then, and I object now. You were the reason for my divorce, Glenda stated firmly. I bet Tim agrees, Mel chimed in. No one needs to get divorced. Neither of you knew anything, and until now you were both content. What's happened, Ed? My medical examination revealed that I've been infertile since birth. I took DNA from William, I disclosed. Mel averted her gaze. Now you know everything, Tim. We can get through this. You love these kids. Do you love me? I asked. But Mel, you both continued to cheat on us even after having 3 children. You kept at it until you started working at his company. And I bet you never stopped, Glenda interjected angrily. Well, what about you, huh? How many times have you and Rob had lovemaking in the last year? Glenda challenged Mel. Shirley stared at her daughter-in-law, awaiting an answer. Please tell me it's not true, she implored. We fell in love, Chalk. We were compatible in and out of bed, so we continued to meet, Mel confessed. Yeah, like last week at the Shady Pines Motel, I added. Mel looked startled. Have you hired a detective? I just activated the locator on your phone, she confessed. We can stop. I'll stop. I only need you, Tim, Glenda pleaded. I want him too. You can leave with your lover. There's no going back, I declared. Shirley, who had been standing, abruptly sat down in the kitchen chair. She looked unwell. Mom, are you okay? I inquired. She began to cry. What have I done? Secrets and lies only lead to more secrets and lies. You should have told Tim from the beginning, Mel said remorsefully. Then none of our children would exist. So maybe what Shirley did wasn't so bad, Glenda reflected. You're missing the point, Mel. You, Rob, and my mother schemed, plotted, and betrayed me. Looking back, my life seems like a big false facade. You stole my life from me. My whole life has been a lie, I confessed, sinking into a chair, overwhelmed with sadness. Mel approached me, but I pushed her away. Sobbing, I vowed, never again, Mel, never again. Glenda embraced me from behind as we all wept. Eventually I stood up and Glenda and I walked away, leaving the others behind. No one followed us. Back at her house, we weren't in the mood for anything else. We worked in the garden and mowed the lawn. After lunch, we started discussing. Are you sure about the divorce? You and Rob were together, I asked Glenda. I feel the same way you do about them taking your life. I'll see your lawyer tomorrow. We can go together. But I don't see any way back. It's been too long and too painful, Glenda replied. This is what I believe in. I have to think about the children. Maybe they should know if there's a divorce, I mused. How should I tell them? Should I call them or write a letter and ask them to call? Glenda pondered. So I did. After lunch, I wrote a letter to my 3 children. Essentially, after laying out the facts, I assured them that they'll always be my children and that I'll always love them. I sent an email and requested them to call. About an hour later, my cell phone rang. It was my daughter, Mary. She asked, Dad, are you okay? And how are you? It's tough going through this. I love you, and you'll always be my dad. I don't know what to do about Mom. How could she and Grandma? Grandma thought she was helping me. I never knew they'd be together forever. I'll never forgive her. What you do now is up to you. I'll need time to figure out what to do. Well, in many ways, I hope we can reach some sort of semi-friendly resolution. I suppose that's what I hope for, I expressed. Yeah, it's not easy, she replied. I just wanted to talk to you. I love you. I love you too. After hanging up, Brad called 2 minutes later, and we had a similar conversation. William called at 11. When he read the letter, he seemed more reserved than the others. When I was at home and everyone else went to school, I noticed something about Mom. I brushed it off, but I needed to talk to someone about it. Sorry, Dad, there's no need to dwell. It's all in the past now. You were in a tough spot and didn't know any of this, he explained. We ended the conversation after a few minutes. Will didn't sound too composed. He was close to his mother. At least he used to be. I wondered how much he really knew about her and Rob. Glenda was in the kitchen, flipping through an old photo album. I joined her. The album contained various photos of her family and mine growing up. After a while, tears welled up in both of our eyes. "Maybe this isn't such a good idea," she mused. "No, we need to come to terms with what's been lost," I replied, embracing her and giving her a deep, friendly kiss. We revisited the memories before heading up to bed. Though we slept together, there was no closeness. On Monday morning, we visited a lawyer named Millie Stanton. She seemed uneasy about discussing our case with both of us present, but we insisted. Millie, a woman in her 50s with a big 50s-style hairdo and gray hair, had a lighthearted demeanor that I found appealing despite her hairstyle. She explained the basics of divorce in our state, noting that infidelity was one of the grounds for divorce, but was now less favored. However, she acknowledged that our situation was unique. We devised a plan where each of us would file for divorce, and I would sue Rob for alimony. Millie suggested that Glenda not be present when discussing Rob's finances, as they were intertwined with hers. She said she would handle the paperwork regarding this, or wait until after maternity leave to file a lawsuit against Rob. I requested that Mel be served at work simultaneously with Rob, scheduled for Wednesday. Then, I took Glenda to her bank to initiate the separation of their assets. This process took some time, and we ended up having a late lunch at Bersoni's Italian restaurant before returning to her house at 4. Deciding to head back to my place, Glenda accompanied me. We didn't bother with the new locks. Upon entering, she took in the familiar surroundings. When I turned to her, she stood beside me with a determined look and said, "I want you to make love to me on her bed now, please." Such a sincere request couldn't be denied. I picked her up and carried her upstairs, playfully throwing her onto the large bed in the master bedroom. She laughed as she undressed, mirroring my actions. As we collapsed onto the bed, everything unfolded leisurely. Initially, it felt odd to have lovemaking with another woman in that bed, but I quickly moved past it. Glenda was assertive, taking what she desired. As we reached the peak, she experienced such a powerful climax that she momentarily lost consciousness, and I nearly fainted too. Afterward, we lay down together. She expressed satisfaction in the experience, mentioning that taking that woman's husband on her own bed was particularly fulfilling. I responded by acknowledging her vindictiveness. She agreed, stating it was beneficial for both of us. I asked if she enjoyed it as well, to which she confirmed, describing it as achieving a revengeful climax. We spent the night together, making love until morning. The experience was tender and loving. After showering, we both shed tears. Despite our emotions, we dressed and went to work. Glenda wore one of Mel's work outfits to work, which seemed like a deliberate choice, possibly out of revenge. During the day, Mel called me at work, insisting that I retrieve my belongings from the house. I arrived wearing a dirty dress and inquired about meeting at the house at 6. I asked about Rob's condition, to which she informed me he was undergoing surgery, expressing her disapproval of my involvement with him. She asked where I was staying, and I mentioned I was at my mom's place in my old room, noting the irony. I asked about her and that woman's living situation. She suggested renting one of the houses and seemed unconcerned about Rob's return. I inquired about the kids, and she expressed concern over them possibly hating her due to the situation. She mentioned not receiving any calls from them and blamed me for it. Our conversation escalated into an argument, with her expressing anger towards me, and I eventually passed out. I met Mel at the house at 6, and she arrived punctually, a surprising turn. As she stepped out of the car, I unlocked the door. She headed upstairs, then screamed, "You had her on my bed! I can't believe you did this!" she accused. I explained she wanted it as revenge for taking her husband. "In my opinion, that's not enough," Mel seethed. She gathered her clothes, and I helped her carry them downstairs, along with a toiletries bag. As she loaded up, oblivious to Glenda's missing clothes, she asked, "Is there any chance we can—" "No, none. I meant every word. It's over between us," I asserted. She appeared despondent, but unsurprised. At first, I really wanted a happy family, like any wife. This seemed like the best solution, but then everything went awry. "I'm sorry for this," she confessed. "Your apologies mean nothing. There's no making up for having children with another man and cheating on me for years. An apology falls short, and I don't believe you're sincere," I rebuffed. With that, she got into her car and drove off. The following day, she got served at her workplace, while Glenda tended to Rob at the hospital. After lunch, my mother called. She said, "Tim, did you really have to rush with the papers? If you calm down, maybe things will improve." "Mom, it's not just that. She's been having an affair with Rob all these years." "Tim, no need for that tone, and remember who initiated all this trouble." "Oh, I remember. Everything was fine until last week. I replied before saying goodbye. I hadn't yet decided what to do. After all, she was the one who caused all of this. We were inundated with well-wishers. Rob was discharged from the hospital on Friday. He couldn't return home because Glenda would have confronted him with his own weapon. Instead, he ended up at our mother's house, where Mel also was. I didn't care at all that they were continuing their affair, even if it was in my old room or his. However, if my mother condones their behavior, she's dead to me. I discussed this with Glenda, and we decided to investigate. I still had the house key. We waited until 2 o'clock in the morning, then I drove us there, used the key to open the back door, and carried a pistol just in case. Glenda waited downstairs while I crept up and looked into my old room, expecting them to be there due to the double bed. They were both present. I had my phone ready, turned on the light, and took some pictures, prompting screams, mostly from Mel, who was undressed. Rob was also undressed, but had a large bandage around his lower ribs, restricting his movement. Mel simply pulled the blanket over herself. Mom came running down the corridor and saw me. She said, "Tim, don't jump to conclusions." I responded, "I'm not. You're condoning what they did, something they're still doing." I then went downstairs. Glenda was waiting for me there. She remarked, "I guess they were together." "Yeah, let's go," I replied. Mom and Mel arrived soon after. Mel was wearing a robe. "Bad boy," she quipped. Rob was nowhere to be seen. Mom said, "They're adults. What can I do? Throw them out onto the street? This is my old bed. I think Rob's intention is to sleep with her wherever I did." Mel retorted, "He didn't sleep with me. Couldn't you hurt him?" I laughed. "As if you let that happen, huh? And what about me? Don't I deserve a chance? Is it true? I hope you both rot in hell." I then turned to my mother. "I'm done with you. I'm still your son, but not anymore. Now you have him, not me." Glenda and I left, returning to her home and going to bed at 4 a.m. We remained together while the divorces proceeded through the courts. Mel and I sold the house and split the money. She received no alimony or anything else from me. The judge didn't look kindly on what she did. My children adapted. The older two had no contact with Mel except for sending a Christmas card. They blocked her calls. Will spoke to her but wasn't very cordial. He spent summers with me and avoided Rob whenever possible. He had no contact with Rob. Mel met Will for lunch several times, but Rob was never with her. Will refused to talk to him. Glenda ended up with the majority of assets, retaining ownership of the house and receiving a substantial sum from Rob's business. Meanwhile, Rob resided in a 2-bedroom apartment near his workplace with Mel. Approximately a week following the divorce, Glenda and I had a conversation. While our carnal chemistry remained intense, we recognized our lack of compatibility in other aspects, prompting my decision to move out. Neither of us felt particularly sorrowful about it. We both seemed to understand early on that our relationship wasn't built to last. Glenda asked me to agree to occasional closeness, provided neither of us pursued other relationships. I consented, acknowledging her allure and our proficiency in that area. Undergoing a successful operation at the age of 49 resolved my fertility issue, which I considered a significant improvement. That's my perspective on it. One evening at the gym, where Ned and I practiced self-defense, I observed a woman vigorously kicking a heavy bag. She exuded confidence and looked remarkable. After finishing, she glanced back at me and jokingly asked if I was scared. I smiled, stepped back, and raised my hands in surrender. She chuckled and introduced herself as Hilda Marks. We agreed to meet for coffee at a nearby store where we engaged in a lengthy conversation. Hilda, a 36-year-old single mother who had left her husband on the West Coast, displayed genuine interest in me, learning everything from my medical history to personal anecdotes. Intrigued by each other, it took 2 weeks before she visited my bungalow and stayed the night. Despite her spirited nature, I asserted dominance in bed, and she didn't seek to outdo me. I wanted to be conquered. I found it a real aphrodisiac. Her son's name is Donald. He was 16. He was in the penultimate grade. He and I got along well because he was a baseball player, and so was I. I ended up helping out on the school team. 6 months after we met, Hilda and I got married. She was pregnant. Marriage by chance. Donald and she settled into the house I purchased next to my previous one. He has his own space, and there's room in the basement for sports gear. This allows his mother to remain sharp. Soon, Thomas Timothy Miller came into my life. He was a blessing. Mel and Rob became things of the past. She switched agencies. I started dating a plumber who was younger than her by 40 years. I still find her attractive. Glenda tied the knot with her college sweetheart, James Wilder. Hilda and I chatted with them briefly. He appeared to be a decent man. I can attest that Glenda still appears attractive. I assume she's still alluring in carnal moments. James and I discussed this once. It was a bonding experience. I haven't completely forgiven my mother, but he visited her when Thomas was born, and she was overjoyed. Hilda ensured his mother had regular visits with him. She empathized with her a bit more than I did. My mother passed away in June of this year. The memorial service took place. Despite our family's past, Rob bid farewell. I didn't. He maintained his distance from me.